excuse me, to the O'Colly Tipoff show. I'm joined by the one, the only, Mia Ledbetter.
Hey.
Mia, how you doing today?
I'm wonderful.
Excited for this matchup?
Yes, to say the least.
Good, so am I. But before we get into it, I kind of want to break down where we're at in the season right now.
Yes.
So obviously we're sitting at 6-3. We've got a couple of tough losses. You know, we had one to UConn, who's now number 5 in the nation, still undefeated.
Which is a really good loss, actually, which we'll get into that later.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But how are you feeling about the season so far?
I mean, we lost some players. We got some young guys starting out. So, like, every season's going to be a new season. And I think just kind of we went through, like, an adjusting period and kind of figuring out how each player was going to be able to work in their formation, who was going to be performing very well, who's going to be a top leader. And in the past season, like, that's been Avery Anderson and all that kind of stuff. So I think we've done really well, just because right now it's kind of getting in with some non-conference players, just getting in the groove of things. So those 3 losses, like one of them was to UConn, which that was a really good loss. Like I'm almost happy with that loss, just how we performed in that game. I think that was just a really good learning experience for us, and I think now we can start, really moving. So thanks for the season. They're looking decent. Obviously, lots of room for improvement, but I'm definitely interested to see how the rest of the season's going to go.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be room for improvement with any team.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point about the UConn loss, I'm happy with it, but I'm only really happy with the second half performance. Yeah. I mean, we got dominated in that first half, but we came back, pistols firing, no pun intended. But
and I think that's pretty important. I mean, because most teams are either a first half team or a second half team, which we're definitely going to get into later, just because the Virginia Tech, we've talked about just the way that they perform. But how we came off that game, especially being beat really bad in the first and then coming out of the half kind of swinging, I think that really is a good testament to how, our team is able to perform like kind of under pressure and facing adversity and stuff.
I agree with you there. Now, we did have earlier on in the season to Southern Illinois kind of a tough loss at home. Mm-hmm. I feel like we've recovered well from that, though.
Yeah, we've had several games just looking at it that they performed decently well. Some players, they're going in for several minutes and not coming out with a whole lot of points, which we'll talk about more later. But coming back off a tough loss like that, it's kind of just if they're willing to kind of play scrappy and, not let that loss kind of bury them and be able to, like, perform off that and not let it carry throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I mean, going into a little bit later on in the season, more recent, we had a 3-game stretch, Tulsa, Prairie View, and UConn. Mm-hmm. That Tulsa and that Prairie View game, they were close in the first half, but the second half, OSU runs away with it, right? UConn, we come in, we get beat in the first half bad. But again, second half comes in, runs away with it, just, a little, too late almost. Mm-hmm. But do you kind of like to see that second half performance, even though the first half has been a little weak for us?
I think it's been pretty important for this team to be able to come off that second half. Like, they definitely need to start stepping it up in the first half just because that tends to be where they lose the game, because they run out of time once they get the momentum in the second half, which is really, really important to not, I don't know, I think that's just kind of their main thing that's kind of kicking them down and making them lose. But that second half performance is something that, like, I love to see that. I like to see that they can go kind of recoup, figure out, hey, like, this, and this is not, like, this went wrong. This is what we're not playing our game, this, that. And they can come up with a game plan, come out, swing in, and really cut the loss deficit really, really close.
And to your point, I also kind of like that because you saw in the loss to UCF, right? Mm-hmm. We blew, I think it was a 15-point lead. Mm-hmm. I mean, to come from that and to change that momentum, 2 games later and start all of a sudden getting better in the second half, that kind of shows the attention from, like head coach Mike Boynton and the players just really, getting in at halftime and figuring out what they need to do.
Yeah. And I think that shows really good leadership, not just from the coaches, but also from, like, some of the leading players, like with the juniors and seniors who have been here, because we've got, like, some young guys and some new guys that may not be used to the swing of things or not necessarily being used to, like, the leadership role at, like, the D1 collegiate level type thing. So I think that speaks a lot as to, like, the leadership that we have coming out of the half. And that's really important. I think they have, like, a lot of room for growth. And if they continue to, like, keep working on that and then bring the second half more into the first half to where they can keep up with their teams more and not fall so far behind, I think they can get a lot more wins than what they're bringing out.
I definitely agree with you there. Now, another thing that I want to touch on with this team, very defensive heavy.
Yes.
As we know. I mean, defensively, OSU has really been getting it done. Struggling a little bit offensively, but, I just want to, what are your thoughts on that?
Defensively, Musa Cisse is kind of carrying. Aside from steals, I mean, when you're 7 foot, I think he's 7'1", with like a 7'5" wingspan. Whenever you're that size, defense is going to play a huge factor in the ability that you can do. And if you're that size and you can't really play defense, then, it's kind of a struggle. But he's been able to have, he's got 30 blocks for the season. He's carrying and all kinds of stuff, rebounds he's been leading, blocks he's been leading. He's just protecting the paint so well. And I think that's really good, especially if they face off with teams who are mainly outside the perimeter shooting wise. Forcing them to not be in the paint because he's right there.
Yeah, forcing them to have to go outside the rim and shoot. To your point about the blocks, though, he does lead the team in blocks. An interesting thing here, he's got 11 more blocks than the rest of the team combined.
Which is insane.
Which, I think that kind of speaks to his ability in the paint.
But, he's so tall, he's basically right there.
Exactly. He doesn't really have to jump to reach the rim. He just has to put his hands up.
But, he's definitely doing a really good job, leading kind of the defense, which helps them get the momentum. Because whenever you get, great boards, great blocks, things like that, there's a whole game shift, especially, kind of in performance abilities. Like when somebody goes in and dunks, it's that was amazing, and then, the whole momentum's changed. And whenever he's able to do stuff like that, I think it really kind of helps us out a lot. Some things that we have seen him do is kind of get into a little bit of foul trouble some games this season, so that kind of sucks because then we won't have him for much of the second half, which is where we really do need him to shine because that's, as we mentioned, it's kind of where we get our momentum from. Yeah. But overall, he's doing really, really, really well for that position, taking on that leadership role. And then Avery Anderson with all of his steals, pretty insane. Really, really good defensively. I'm very proud of our performance on that end.
I definitely agree with you there. And, moving into Avery Anderson here for a second, not only does he lead the team in steals, but he also leads in points per game and assists. Not only has he been good on the defensive side of the ball, but offensively, he's been pacing the team.
He has a very good, leadership role and presence. There's some games where, he is the leading scorer with, 18 points. And there's others where he kind of, backs off necessarily. If Bryce Thompson has a really good game shooting wise, you can tell that Avery Anderson doesn't shoot as much. Yeah. If you really look into their stats and stuff, but he does lead really well with his assists and things like that and steals. So I think kind of his momentum and ability to just control the setting is super, super huge, and that's been really good for us because he's been here for, I think he's a senior this year, so he's really taken on the leadership role in the last couple of years, and it's been really, really evident, especially last season. He did an incredible job last season, just being the point guard, being the leader. Not necessarily that he's leading in everything. He might have an off night, but you can still tell that the team kind of depends on him and looks up to him, which is really, really important whenever you're more of a defensive-based team or you're losing in the first half, to have somebody like that who, still
can kind of breathe the life into the team. And I think to your point, he has off nights sometimes. He's had some single-digit point games, but he's, as we talked about with the assists, he's very good at recognizing who has the hot hand.
Yes.
And he feeds the ball.
Mm-hmm. And he's not, some things with point guards that you notice a lot in other games is that they might tend to be selfish. And with this, him leading an assist and how many he ends up having per games is really great to kind of see, just because that he's more of a team player than as a me. I'm a star of the show. He understands that role, and I think that's a really good for the team to have somebody like that.
Yeah, I think it gives him a good identity. It's very unselfish, very much so. This is a team first mentality.
Yeah.
Whoever's got the hot hand, we need to recognize that, get into the positions where we can do what's best for the team, not necessarily what's best for themselves.
And that's definitely how OSU plays. Is they're a very team-oriented team. Some guys, it's they have this star player, but OSU's not necessarily like that. You can kind of tell just how they're kind of sporadic with their stats, but also just they have several players bringing in around the same numbers.
There's contributions coming from all over the roster. And speaking of those contributions, another guy I want to talk about here real quick is John Michael Wright.
Yes.
Now, John Michael Wright has been pretty good. I believe he's third on the team in points per game. But past that, he's shooting 100% from the free throw line.
Which is a really big deal. To be able to shoot 100% from the free throw line is kind of iffy. Not a lot of players can do it. It's kind of difficult. But he has 15.
Yeah.
So it's not he's only been to the line, 4 or 5 times. No, he's actually there quite often, and he's able to perform, which is super, super important to come down to it. Because the game might come down to that, and
Exactly.
a team could lose off the free throw line.
Exactly, and especially when you get late in the games, like we've talked about, they've made it. They've taken either the game away in the second half, or they started making it close, and you get the other team trying to foul you, trying to stop some momentum. And John Michael Wright has the ball, and he's kind of automatic when he gets to that free throw line. You've got to be feeling much better when you see him step up to it.
You got to have a lot of confidence in him, and he's got to have some confidence in himself to be able to be like, okay, this is my role in the team. This is what I can bring to the table, and he's doing really, really well. He's new to the team. He's a starter, which is really big on him. But yeah, he's been pretty dominant, not just from there, but as a player in a whole. Just having him come in, kind of as a new guy and be able to step in the leadership role, take on the starting position, and be able to perform in like the places that we need him to perform.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about the team's play style, where everybody kind of has a role.
Yes.
And they're very good at recognizing that role and doing with it what they need to do. I mean, Musa Cisse, defensively, obviously he's the rim protector.
Yes.
He's blocking shots left and right. Avery Anderson, he's pacing the offense. He's getting the assists, pushing it where it needs to be. Then you get to people like John Michael Wright. He gets up to the free throw line. You got guys like Caleb Boone who get out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Still getting stuff done.
Caleb Boone is kind of almost a little underrated. Last season, it was him and his brother, and it was like twin mentality, which twin's better, kind of that conversation came into play. But he's shooting 50% from the field, which is really, really good numbers. And that's something that you really like to see. You need a guy who can be able to go out and shoot like that consistently, and that's definitely something that we needed this whole season. I think it's a very good team effort from everybody as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I would 100% agree with you there. I think we're going to go ahead and take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to go ahead and break down the matchup here between Virginia Tech and OSU, so we'll see you on the other side.
We kind of realized that you can get ribs anywhere, you can get a steak anywhere, but you can't always get a Mountain View hot link like ours. So we really decided to focus on that niche and realized we had something really special. So that's when we started focusing more on the hot links, but it's still the same family recipe they were making all those years ago. For us, many of our people that work here have been with us for years and decades. So whereas machines kind of break down over time, the people just get better. And it shows in the products we produce. When you buy a Mountain View product, not only is it gonna taste dynamite, but you're also feeding Oklahomans. You're helping employ Oklahomans, and you're helping to fund the state's economy. So what's better than that?
We use the very best of the best ingredients. Demerara sugar is the best that is. Very high quality fruits, berries. The milk we use is the best milk there is. That's why it makes our product stand by itself. I like to make yogurt because I like to eat yogurt. We've been doing this for ourselves for many years because it's a tradition in our family. And we want to have a product which would be very similar to French yogurt, but with our touch of uniqueness, linking our name, our products, with the reputation of the Made in Oklahoma Coalition was probably the best thing we have done as far as promoting our product.
Welcome back to the Ocali Tipoff Show. Once again, I'm here with Mia Ledbetter. Now, Mia, we took the first segment, we really dissected, OSU, the team, the players, but I want to talk about their opponent today, Virginia Tech. Now, the Hokies are 9-1. They've got wins against UNC, Minnesota, Penn State. The loss comes to College of Charleston. What do you like? What do you not like?
Just by that, you can tell that there's a really good team. UNC started the season ranking number 1, and they beat them. So, you have to give them that. I mean, that they're going to be a really good team. They're going to be a tough battle. I mean, 9-1 is almost a perfect record. Their one loss is a little strange, just because it's like you beat the almost number 1 team in the nation, then you go off and get a loss by that. But it happens. But they're a really good team performance-wise. They have a lot of guys who are able to perform. They do take on the many different roles. They're going to give us a run for our money today.
And speaking of the many guys that they have that can perform, there's one guy in particular I want to start by talking about. Sean Padula. Now, he's an Oklahoma State, not Oklahoma State alum or anything like that, but he's from Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. He's from Edmond.
He's from Edmond, yeah. So I want to just take a second because he's leading Virginia Tech in points per game. I mean, he's pacing their offense. He's really kind of like the leader of that team. So, just talk about him for a second there.
He does a really good job leading. The points per game, him able to put that up, they get a really good start to all of their games. I mean, they are a first half team, and it shows drastically whenever you look at each points that they have, like the point breakdown from the first half to the second half, things like that. And he does a really, really good job as controlling the game, kind of taking in a leadership role, not necessarily as much as Avery Anderson with his team work mentality, okay, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. He kind of takes on more of the leadership. I'll get it done, I'll do this. But he does a really, really good job with that. And I think that helps him a lot with this team and how they're able to perform, and they get ahead really fast in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely get ahead really fast. But to your point about Sean Padula here, not only does he kind of take that leadership role, but he's really a workhorse for Virginia Tech. I mean, he leads the team in minutes per game. I mean, he's averaging 34 minutes a game, and he's still shooting 50% from the field. I mean, 35% from three, 75% from the free throw line. I mean, he is just an all-around good player offensively, and he's getting out there and he's just eating minutes for this team.
Mm-hmm. Which, yeah, he's pretty killer for this team, honestly. Yeah. But they do have a lot of leading guys, not just him, but Grant Basile, he's insane. He's doing really, really good. He's shooting 43% from the three.
Wow.
Which is insane considering he's 6'9" and he's a forward. I mean, usually you don't really get bigger guys who are able to put up those numbers from the three. But now that's kind of becoming a more common thing. But he's insane at that. 43% from the three is crazy coming from a guy like him.
And then 52% from the field too. I mean, it's that combination of length, height, and just pure shooting ability that he has that I think makes him really just that dangerous.
Yeah, he's kind of the player that I'm more drawn to. Watching that, looking at his stats, I'm like, okay, he's really who I would look at. Sean Padula, though, is doing really, really good in that leadership role. You just see people like Grant Basile, and you're kind of like, how? It's kind of...
And speaking of Grant Basile, in their last game versus Dayton, he had, I believe, 22 points. And, a lot of them came from beyond the arc.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at 6'9", you would think he'd want to drive in the paint, try and get a layup, go for a dunk. But no, he kind of opts to shoot from the three-point line a lot more than he goes in.
That's something that OSU is really going to have to watch out for in this game is, players like those two. Because when you have guys like that able to put up all these numbers who are such confident shooters from just about anywhere, something you definitely have to watch out for. It's some good things to have. They are pretty much carrying this Virginia Tech team, but they don't just have these two players. They've got a pretty stacked lineup of at least 4 guys I can think of who always got, and they consistently perform very, very well. And I think that's kind of what helps them out is just the consistency and the accuracy that all of these guys play with. I think it'll be really, really fun to watch.
I agree. I think it's the chemistry of that team because that starting 5, I mean, they very much so lead the team. There's a bit of a drop-off once you get past them. I mean, but that starting 5 is dangerous. They've got the top 3 on it all have over 100 points on the season. And the third guy we haven't even touched on. I want to talk about him for a second. Justin Mutz here.
Yes.
All right. He's another great player on this Virginia Tech team. He dropped 27 on UNC. I mean, think about that. The former number 1 team in the nation. Now, I know they've had a couple of losses this season, so they're not there anymore. But still, 27 points in a game on this level, that's just downright impressive.
That's a lot. And that's kind of the difference between Virginia Tech and OSU. So with Virginia Tech, they've got players who are able to go out and have 20-plus points a game and are really consistent shooting-wise. And with OSU, we have games where we have about 18 points, and then we drop off to single-digit games. And I think we just have to work on more consistency on the OSU end, and that might be what gets us in this game. Because of how consistent and how high-scoring Virginia Tech is, I think OSU defense is going to have to match that. But they are a very offensive-heavy team. They're a get-out-and-go in the first half. So 27 points is so impressive, especially against a team like UNC.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, get out and go in the first half. When you look at their score by periods, they've got 417 points in the first half compared to an opponent's score of 288. When you break that down by game, that's a plus 12.9 point differential. But then you look at the second half, 354 points to 347. That goes from plus 12.9 in the first half down to plus 0.7 in the second half. That's a big drop-off.
Yeah, that if OSU can keep with them in the first half, then I think they have a chance. However, for them being able to perform so well in the first half, their second half performance, it's not as great,
Now, let
and
me
that's
ask you
pretty
this.
obvious.
Let me ask you this. Obviously, that's a huge drop off.
Yes.
That's almost 13 points right there. A little, almost, it's about 12 and a half, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is?
It could be a number of things whenever you're like looking at it, but I think almost they just kind of let off the gas. But they've got these solid guys who are playing the whole game. So I think they kind of just get gassed a little bit and they kind of just relax because they have such a big lead that they don't, unless they just want to blow out all of their opponents, they don't necessarily have to continue at that same pace. But I think they need to get more guys into their rotation and kind of keep moving and getting guys worked in who are able to, keep up and score just as much. So that way their second half isn't as bad of a drop off.
I kind of agree with you a little bit on maybe they're getting gassed a little bit, but when you look at their schedule, they've had a couple of close games in there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Penn State they beat 61-59. College of Charleston they lost 77-75. Charleston Southern 69-64. They've had a couple of close games and that get close in the second half. So maybe they take their foot off the gas at the beginning of the second half, but to not go back to putting the foot down, I personally, this is just my belief. I think it kind of comes down to the fact that it's a very top-heavy team.
Mm-hmm.
That starting five accounts for pretty much all of their offense. You look at it, the drop-off after that, 97 points on the bottom of their top five, but then 52 once you start getting into the bench, into the rotational players. When you're seeing kind of a drop-off like that, not only offensively, but then defensively as well, you're going to start experiencing that in the second half when you've got to sub your guys out. They need a breather. They need some water. They need to just take a second.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you start to see that drop off, and that's when teams have been able to make it close against Virginia Tech.
Yeah. Their first half performance, they just need to carry that more into their second half. And then they'd be absolutely dominant, which they already are in the first half. We've looked at that. I mean, those numbers are pretty insane. They're close to doubling what their opponents are bringing out in the first, which pretty incredible. But they've got to get in those rotations. I mean, you almost can't be completely dependent on your first five because they can't perform the entire game. You've got to be able to work them in, and if you aren't going to do that, you got to make sure that these players are ready to go the full time, both halves, and be able to perform. And I think that's where the drop-off is. But OSU could take huge advantage of that second half drop-off if they're able to perform well in the first half. Which
I think that's going to be the key to it.
Yeah.
And I think we'll get into the keys of the matchup a little bit later on. But right now, I do have a question for you about the Virginia Tech situation here. How do you go about solving a drop-off like that? I mean, if you're the coach, you're looking at something like that. What do you do?
I mean, honestly, it's kind of a question as to where that drop-off's coming from. Because how do you have so many points in the first half, how your players, shooting so high, they're able to be almost 50% from everywhere. They've got players, Justin Mutz is 62% from the field.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I would love to have a player like that on the team. It's just why is that not translating into the second half? Where is that going wrong? And I think that's just kind of, I don't know if that's player-wise or that's coaching-wise. It could be both. But I think that's something that Virginia Tech needs to understand and get it head on as to, hey, why are we incredible here and why is there a drop-off here? It's almost like they go into the half and they're like, oh, we got it. Let's chill. And then
it's like a lack of halftime adjustment.
Yeah, because OSU, we talked about, they came out of the half and they come swinging. They adjust, they understand, they talk about things that they did wrong, things like that, and they're like, okay, let's attack. Virginia Tech, on the other hand, they're almost completely opposite. They get to the game, tip-off happens, and they're like, let's go. And they're like gung-ho and they're ready, and then they come out of the half and it's like, and then the other team starts, they just pull up a little bit, and then the other team catches up, and so then they have to come back at it in the first half, and I think that's, what happened in their loss was they had to catch back up because it was only, a 2-point loss?
Yeah, it was only 2 points.
So I think they almost let off too long, and then they ran out of time.
Couldn't come back.
Yeah,
they just to get the gas back on fast enough. Yeah, I hear there. And another thing with the Virginia Tech team that I'm seeing, back to this top five, they really are dominant. So the question would be, do you kind of maybe take a couple guys, switch out rotational players in for that starting five, just mess it up just a little bit, just to kind of get some of your guys in that rotation coming off the bench?
Yes. You've got to have a deep bench. Players or teams that don't have a deep bench, you can tell, and it bites them in the butt because, it's so hard to be able to play all game. You can play all game, but you can't perform as well all game as you did in the first 10 minutes. Like you can attack and attack and attack, but then you can't finish the game.
Yeah, there's that exhaustion that
Yes.
kicks in.
So if they don't have a deep bench, who are they going to look to whenever? Say their two best players get hurt. Like what are they going to
what
do
do you
then?
do then?
Because their bench clearly isn't as deep as, other teams.
As other teams,
Yes.
or just the bench isn't as deep as it maybe needs to be going into the second half. And
Correct.
so that might be a coaching adjustment that Virginia Tech looks to make if they start losing a little bit more. But I think right now we'll go ahead and take another break, and when we come back, we're going to break down the keys to this matchup.
I've been here since the beginning, so 4 years. Scratch is more focused on farm and mostly made in Oklahoma products, keeping it local. Sustainability is our biggest thing. That's one of the reasons why this place opened.
I've been the chef here at Scratch for 2.5 years. Started here as a line cook. Our food and drinks are a bit separate entities almost inside the restaurant. So the food is now up to 85% of the products we bring in are raised or grown locally. It's all based off of things that I grew up eating in southern Oklahoma, the things my grandparents ate.
Fresh food, clean food, organic food, sustainability, that's all of our thing. From front of house to back of house, we're able to maintain both with freshness. But made in Oklahoma means we get it straight from the farms that are 20, 30 minutes, another little county away. We get it straight from them.
We would design something, it was set on the counter, and people was either, if enough of them said, this isn't it never made to the line. Dad was excited that they're all original. They were all designed on Mom's kitchen table, and it gets in your blood after a while.
We're very happy that Pamela and Michael have taken over the business and kept the family going.
We took the business over in 2017. When we found that it was available, we wanted to keep the legacy of family alive, but it was also incredible products that deserved to be a part of Made in Oklahoma's story. We were a part of Made in Oklahoma years ago, and so it kind of grew as Made in Oklahoma grew.
Oklahoma is ingrained into everything that we did. We've been here most of our life. That's what we entailed our whole business on, was the Oklahoma homegrown feeling.
Welcome back to the Ocali Tipoff Show. We're here breaking down the OSU Cowboys versus the Virginia Tech Hokies as they get ready for their 2022 Basketball Hall of Fame Invitational matchup. And Mia, I think we're about ready to break down this matchup here. We've
Yes.
talked about both teams, kind of looked at what they're good at, maybe what they're not. So going into this, what are your keys for OSU?
OSU is going to have to perform. They're going to have to keep up in that first half. We've talked about it. OSU seems to be more of a second half team. Virginia Tech seems to be more of a first half team. So it's going to be really, really fun to watch to see who's able to carry into the other half. Is OSU going to be able to keep up in the first half and then proceed to do what they do in the second half? Or is Virginia Tech going to be able to do what they do in the first half and proceed to do that in the second?
So you're expecting to see kind of more of like a tale of two halves going on.
Yes.
Okay, I can see that. Now, what I want to talk about, for OSU, what it's going to come down to is I think that Virginia Tech, as we talked about, very overpowering offense. OSU doesn't have that kind of offensive firepower. I mean,
No.
they're really lacking an offensive star, if that makes sense.
Yes. Very much so. They have a defensive star. We talked about that in Musa Cisse. We talked about Avery Anderson and his steals and things like that. And that is going to come in handy for this game. As we talked about, they've got shooters who are 50+% from almost anywhere. And if they aren't 50+%, they're in the 40s. So, they have a lot of players who are very offensive heavy. They can obviously shoot. They can shoot just about anywhere. Yeah. So having Musa Cisse in the paint is going to help us shutting them down there. But they can shoot outside. So I think our defense is going to have to really step it up, which is something that they've proven that they can do. But our offense is also going to have to put in some work.
Yeah, and to that point, I think, like we said, I think the defense we expect to be able to step up. But with the offense, I think you're going to need to see a guy like Avery Anderson. He's really going to have to perform this game. I mean, when you go and you look at his stats, right? Avery Anderson, he's averaging about 30 minutes a game, 12.6 points a game, right? You really kind of need to see a dominant performance from him. He needs to really take on that leadership role. I mean, you know, when you've got a guy shooting 41% from the field, but only 15% from the three, you know, I don't necessarily like those numbers. So what are you doing if you're Avery Anderson? How do you go in and take that offensive power?
You know, I think in a situation like this, we're not going to have to necessarily depend on Avery Anderson. That might be controversial. I think Avery Anderson is going to have to really kick it into gear and maintain his leadership role. He's going to have to control this game in every other aspect. But I think players like Bryce Thompson, Caleb Boone, John Michael Wright, other players like that are going to have to step into the scoring role.
So now do you think it's okay, go ahead. You're stopping me.
Bryce Thompson, Avery Anderson's an excellent shooter. That's something we know. He can do it. He's had several 18-point games, but so has Bryce Thompson. Bryce Thompson has also had 18-point games. He's averaging, I think it was 11.3 points per game.
Yeah, 11.3.
He's just below Avery Anderson. I think he's going to have to really kick it into gear for this game and take on the leadership shooting position. I think that's kind of the big thing for just this season. They're going to need one player. Like, they might not necessarily be an offensive-minded team, but they need one player or even two who can step up and just be like a consistent shooter who's able to put up the numbers that they're going to need.
I don't even think they need one player to consistently step up every game, you know, but they just need one player every game. It can be different, you know. Sometimes it's going to be Bryce Thompson. Sometimes it's going to be Avery Anderson. And, I mean, we've seen that, you know, because you've seen, you know, games where, like, Avery Anderson will be the leading scorer at 18 points, and then the next game it's Bryce Thompson, and then all of a sudden it's Caleb Boone, and it kind of goes all over the place there. And I think that's okay when you have that consistency if somebody's going to step up. But the question is, who is it?
Yes. Another thing with their shooting-wise is they do have a person who can get up to, you know, 18 points a game. But then everybody else on the roster is going to have single digits.
Yeah.
So no matter how much one person may carry, the rest of the team has to put in a little bit of effort. And I'm not saying that they're not putting in effort at all. They are, because they're doing incredible, you know, working as a team. Just the points they need to put up needs to be more than single-digit numbers.
So do you feel like they're feeding that hot hand too much?
Not necessarily, but yes, kind of.
So no, but yes.
Yeah, no, but yes. We've had players who will go in for, 25-plus minutes and come out with, 2 to 8 points, which kind of can't happen whenever our leading scorer only has 18 points.
Yeah, I mean, you go into a game and you play for, 15, 20 minutes and you score 2 or 4 points. I mean, that's 1 or 2 layups right there.
Yeah, especially for Musa Cisse. We saw several games of his where, he was in for 25, 28 minutes and he came out with 6 points. He was in for 35 minutes and came out with 6 points in one game. I couldn't tell you which game it was, but stuff like that, you kind of can't have that happen. But with him, he is stepping up in the defensive role. So, I will take his lack of offensiveness on the scoring end since he's putting up such big stuff for the defense. But as for everybody else, we've got to attack. We've got to keep shooting. I don't know if they're just not shooting enough or if they're not necessarily,
I don't know if maybe it's not they're not shooting enough, but the shots aren't falling.
Yeah.
I mean, this has always been a team that, has not been great beyond the arc,
No.
I don't think that's safe to say.
Yeah.
But it's when you know that that's your weakness, drive in the paint. You've got a 7-foot tall, forward in Musa Cisse. Feed him. Let him take the shots.
Yes. Which, speaking of Musa Cisse, so I work at the gym here on campus. And this summer, he came in almost every single day.
Almost every day.
Almost every day. That man was in here constantly. He was just shooting and he was shooting and he was shooting. Because last season, there were games where he missed so many free throws or he was right under the goal and just kept missing. And he was working on that every single day. And I think that's just a testament to kind of the willpower and the hard work that this man has. And now he's 59.6%, things like that. He doesn't shoot threes.
Still doesn't shoot threes, but
we don't need him to shoot threes.
That's not what he's there for.
With this team, I think we kind of just need to really know that that's our weakness.
Yeah.
And try to stay away from that as much as possible. But we also need to better that because there's going to be teams who are like, well, they're not very good at shooting threes. Let's push them out there and make them shoot out there. So I think they need to really work on that on the side, but not necessarily in the game as
Here's
much.
the thing, and then somebody, but like with Musa Cisse, right? We've talked about 60% from the field. He's definitely improved. Obviously, he's been putting in the work over the summer.
Yes.
And then he comes in defensive minded. He's been great protecting the rim. But here's the thing: against a team like Virginia Tech, and this kind of gets back into the matchup here. Against a team like Virginia Tech, who is really good from 3-point.
Yes.
I mean, you've got multiple guys shooting 35% plus into the 40s. Is that almost going to hurt you, if that makes sense?
I don't, I think it's really going to be a battle of who's going to want it more. And I know that kind of sounds dumb, but just because we have two polar opposite teams. I mean, one is defensive, one is offensive minded. One's first half, one's second half. Like, it's so different. So who's going to be able to perform in what they're most comfortable with better? And Virginia Tech shooters, they have shown consistency, which has been incredible for them. And I think that's mainly what helps them win, is how consistent they are. Granted, we did talk about the drop off in the second half, but they're so consistent. Like,
but I think it's that
they have such high
consistency
numbers
on that top five. It's the ability to come in and overpower teams in that
Yes.
first half, and then that allows them to have that rough second half. But it's okay because they can absorb it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what might get Oklahoma State today is how dominant Virginia Tech is in that first half.
Yeah.
We aren't. I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah.
But we are in the second. That's where we make up a lot of our ground is in that second. But we might be too far behind if we don't keep up in that first half.
I think you might run into a situation like we had against UConn. UConn, they got us in that first half. I mean, granted, it was towards the end of the first half that they really went on a run, but they just put up so many points on us in the first half that by the time we got to the second half and we started dominating, it was too little too late, like we talked about earlier. But I mean, think about that loss for a second. UConn is 11-0. They're second in the Big East only because they haven't played a conference game, and they're number 5 in the nation. And we are the closest team. We came the closest the team has come to beating them.
I think when it comes down to it, I think we have the willpower. I think we have the strength. I think we have the drive to win in games that we know that we're kind of the underdog per se. So I think that's going to be important for us to understand going into this game is how dominant Virginia Tech is.
Yeah.
But it's just going to be a matter of who's going to step up and be able to get out of the single-digit numbers and be able to perform. Because clearly, like as we've talked about, Musa Cisse is dominating on the defensive end.
Yeah.
Avery Anderson is dominating on the steals and the control of the game.
Yeah.
Who's dominating on the points? Who's going to do it today?
There's a player that I want to touch on that I think this may be a bit of a hot take here, but I think he's starting to figure it out, and I think he's starting to get it ready. And I want to talk about Keon Williams, the freshman.
Yes.
All right, he's a freshman. He's not doing great this season. Let's be honest. He's having a bit of a tough time adapting to the new league, but he has had a double-digit game.
Mm-hmm.
He's got the capability in him to get there.
And he was really good in high school. I mean, he's from Jonesboro, Arkansas. It is his first year. The adjustment from the high school level to the collegiate level is huge. I mean, it's going to take a couple games to get adjusted
But
to that.
not only the collegiate level. This is Division I. This is
Yes.
the highest
Yes.
of the collegiate level.
I think it's going to take a lot of adjustment, but he's a freshman.
Yeah.
And for him to be able to go out in the games and produce something at all, I think that speaks a lot about him and the things that he's capable of doing. Just because to know that Mike Boynton trusts him enough, hey, I know you're new, but you're going
get in there. We're getting your minutes.
You got to do this. You've got to be able to do this.
And he's the only freshman out there.
Yes, and he's got the capabilities to do it. I mean, like you said, he's got a double-digit game. When that's going to really kick in and be consistent is the main question. But I think he's got some promise.
That's what I'm saying. That's where my hot take is. I think we're looking for offense today, right?
Yes.
Where do you least expect it from? The freshman who's been struggling a little bit. I think maybe, just maybe, Keon Williams because he's going to be coming in against the rotational players that we've seen the drop off against.
Yes. I think for him, maybe it's just nerves trying to battle that. He's getting a good number of minutes. Not a whole lot. He's averaging 11.7, but you don't want to
you don't want to overload him.
Yeah, you don't want to put too much pressure on him.
That slow transition.
Yes, and I think that's kind of going to be a big deal. I think that's what Boynton's kind of trying to do, and the coaching staff trying to do is just ease him into the role, because you get a new guy and you want to hit him hey, welcome here. You got to do this, this, and this, and this, and then he's going to be like, oh, and then the pressure of performing is kind of too high, especially for somebody as young. But I think so far he's doing pretty good.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Well, let's take one last break, but when we get back, we'll give our score predictions and finish breaking down this matchup.
My name is James Remedi. Fired Up Stilly is the name of the business, and I'm one of the owners. We all three met, the three owners, working as employees at a similar place like this. What I hope for is for everybody to feel welcome, like family. Not only do I want students to feel welcome to come here and study and use our free Wi-Fi, but also I want adults and families to be able to come in. We've built a connection with a lot of people, and Stillwater's a big community, so we just want to invite everybody to be able to eventually make their way through our doors. Well, definitely the teas, I would say. Most people fall in love with them. They just got a great amount of energy, gets you going through your day, and it just kickstarts you to get, everything you need to done. For myself, it would just have to be, being the owner, owning something that, is able to impact other people's lives, and, the way we can affect our community is something that I really have always wanted to do. We love our clients and our customers that come through every day, and we enjoy getting to know them.
Hi, I'm Shauna here at Where the Buffalo Roam in beautiful downtown Pawnee, Oklahoma. We have a lot of beautiful and unique items for sale in the store, but our number one items are Navajo jewelry, Pendleton blankets, and Consuela. It's a great place to shop, a beautiful downtown, so come see us in Pawnee, Oklahoma.
Hi, I'm Amanda Akins. I'm the owner of Hurricane Dixie Leather. I started this company back in about 2015, and I think that one of the most unique things about our store is that we're not just your everyday mom and pop leather shop. We use a lot of color and unique techniques that set us apart from others. We are a full Wrangler retailer. We have lots of Wrangler jeans and shirts. We've also got some other fun boutique clothes, and everything, all the leather goods in the store are made here in the shop. We also accept custom orders.
Our state is one of the most beautiful and unique states in the USA. With diverse geographies, the historic Route 66, unforgettable restaurants, and some of the greatest people on the planet. With so much to see and so much to do, living in Oklahoma means one of the best vacation spots is right in our own backyard. Doesn't this story need to be told? As filmmakers and photographers based right here in Oklahoma, we thought so. And hey, who doesn't like a good road trip? So, we packed up our cameras, teamed up with Lieutenant Governor Matt Pinnell and the Oklahoma Tourism and Recreation Department, and that's how this series was born. We want to show you why traveling within the great state of Oklahoma is a great idea. So come join us for thousands of miles over the next year, from Broken Bow to Black Mesa. This is the Oklahoma Road Trip.
And welcome back to the Okali Tipoff Show. Still here with Mia.
Not going nowhere.
No, you sure?
Pretty sure.
All right, it's unfortunate for me, but we'll continue talking. So, now, I know you had said while we were in the commercial break that there was a couple more players you wanted to talk about. So who was it, and why did you want to talk about them?
So Tyreek Smith and Caleb Boone are kind of two players that I want to talk about.
So let's start with Tyreek Smith. How about that?
So both of them have actually been here for quite a while, and they have been scoring very, very well. They've been really good playmakers and kind of glue guys. That's what I like to call them when they're just kind of, in the sidelines, but still stepping forward and making things happen. They are great in those positions. They haven't gone anywhere, as I mentioned earlier. Keelan Boone left, and Caleb is still here. But I think they just perform really, really well. And they're kind of almost in the background players. They just, they're not in the starting five. They come off the bench, but they perform really well off the bench. If you look, Caleb Boone is averaging 9.6 points per game, and Tyreek Smith is at 7.3. Those are kind of low numbers. They're still single digits, but for the minutes that they're getting, I think they're getting in there. They're doing their job.
Well, not only for the minutes they're getting, but coming off the bench, you don't need these guys to be putting up 15, 20 points a game. You just need these guys to be consistent offensively scoring, just putting up a couple layups, keep padding the lead, or get you back in the game.
And they're really good supportive players. They come off this bench and they bring momentum. I mean, every time you watch them, they can go out there and they make some pretty sick plays every now and then. They've got it on the drives. They feed them through and they've got a sick dunk going in. They're really good off the bench momentum makers. Both of them work really well with the players on their team because they've been here for so long. So them matched up with, say, Bryce Thompson and Avery Anderson, it's a good combination. Yeah. And I think they're not necessarily underrated, but I don't think they're getting as much hype as they should be. Because John Michael Wright, he's new here, he's starting, things like that.
Stuff that's kind of bumped them down to the bench,
and
but
it
they're still
does
performing
suck,
there.
But they're not taking it. They're not letting it hold them down. They're still going in there. They're doing everything that they need to do. They're performing at the level they need to do.
And I think that's kind of one of the advantages that OSU holds in this
Yes.
game is because we have rotational and bench players like Tyreek
Yes.
Smith who can come off the bench and average 7.3 points
Yeah,
a game,
and that's-
playing in 15, 16 minutes a game.
I think that's kind of the difference between us and Virginia Tech. As we talked, Virginia Tech doesn't have as deep of a bench. We have guys who we can trust and know. We can send them in there, and it's not going to be like a huge drop-off. They're going to go in there, and we can trust them. They're going to do what they need to do. They're going to get the plays right. They're going to be momentum makers. They're going to go in there and attack.
Exactly.
And then we can take them out. And then our starters,
guys
they're
back in
nice
there.
and fresh, and,
And I
the
think
consistency's there.
that kind of leads into, I know we had talked about one of your keys to the game was, that second half takeover, but one of my keys to the game was these bench players, was the rotational guys up against Virginia Tech's rotation.
Mm-hmm.
Because, we already talked about Virginia Tech's drop-off. And while obviously you're going to have a drop-off from your
Yes.
starting to your bench, that's why they're in their
Starters.
respective positions and starters. Yes, thank you. But, I don't think the drop-off is as drastic on the OSU team.
Yeah.
I think is what it comes down to. And when you have guys who can still perform at that high level, going up against the Virginia Tech bench, who not as deep, not as well rounded, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be one of the keys. We have to take advantage of when their bench is on the field or is on the court.
Yes. One thing, though, that I kind of, keep coming back to, just because I think it's one of our biggest, cons to our team. There's not a big drop-off from our starters to our bench. But it's because our starters can go in there for 20, 30-plus minutes and come out with single digits. And then our bench players can go in for 10, 20 minutes and come out with single digits. We have like one or two players a game who are getting in the double digits, who are, really making plays. We haven't had a player reach 20 points in a game.
Yeah, it's true.
Virginia Tech, on the other hand,
Has
they have multiple players
who've reached
reaching
20 points
almost
multiple
30
times.
points.
Almost, yeah.
Which is crazy. I mean, that's insane. So I think, they're going to kind of balance out. It's like the issue of we do have the consistency, but they have the dominance.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, to that dominance, that we talked about at least, a lot of that, like we said, has come in the first half. So when your starters are in there, knowing how good we've been defensively, do you feel comfortable when you're, if you're Oklahoma State, sitting there, putting out your rotational guys, knowing that your defense kind of has their back, if that makes sense?
Yeah. That's one thing that we've always done. I mean, we sub our bench in, and we sub them constantly, and we sub them fast. First maybe 5 minutes, we've already got a rotation going. And I like that in a team. I like that you can, look at your bench and be like, okay, you can go and you can go and you can go. Like, I trust all of you guys.
Yeah.
And that's what Mike Boynton does a really good job of, and the coaching staff is getting a deep bench, getting the players who are comfortable going in. And, Keon Williams, freshman, he's comfortable going in. He's not putting up huge numbers, but he's a freshman. We don't expect him to.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a freshman putting up 20-plus points, they're not going to be playing at the college level long. They're probably going to NBA pretty quick. So, like, that is something really good for us, but we've got to make sure that we put up the points. But, like we've mentioned, our defense is doing so well that if, you know, we can get a hold of Virginia Tech and we get a hold of them early, I think we have a way better chance. But everything's going to have to step up some more.
So, back to that key for you, because I know, you know, we've talked a lot about first half versus second half and the performance differences in both teams. Going into the second half, what is the score you're going to feel comfortable looking at if you're Oklahoma State? You know, like, if you're sitting there, how much are you down by that you're still comfortable?
So, one thing that I've always, like, known about basketball, if you're down by 13 or more, you leave your starters in. You don't rotate. So going at the half, I'm going to be comfortable around 15 or less.
15 or less.
15's probably pushing it for me.
15's a big number.
Yeah. But like I said, you know, because Virginia Tech comes out so strong, all of their opponents are losing by a lot more than that, you know, around the half. So I think I feel pretty comfortable if we're 15. We might still lose if we're down by 15 at the half.
I'm going to be honest.
But
I feel like if we're down by 15 at the half, we're losing. I'll just be honest.
No,
I think that number's a little high for me. I'll be honest.
But I just think that's a solid performance for us for the way that we've been doing.
I think if you can perform like we did in the second half of that UConn game, you can maybe feel comfortable at 15.
Yeah.
But I don't think we've had, like, we've been dominant in the second half, don't get me wrong, but I don't think there's been a dominant enough performance in the second half of any game to feel comfortable at 15 points, if that makes sense.
I'm okay with the loss of this team as long as we perform exceptionally well in the places that we need to perform. Okay, so, like, say, you know, we have several guys who have 15-plus points. That's a win for me because considering the way that we've been performing all season, I think right now, because we're about to come up on conference games, right now is when we need to figure out how we're going to perform on everything else, how we're going to improve everywhere else. So a loss right now, to me, is not a big deal.
I kind of feel like a loss right now is a big deal. I think, you know, already 3 losses, you know, into the season. We're already at the bottom of the Big 12 standings. I don't know how many more losses we can stand, considering you're going to go into conference play and you're going to have to take on teams like Baylor, like Kansas, you know, like teams that we know are good.
Virginia Tech is just a solid team. And I think that if we perform as well as we did in the second half of the UConn game, if we perform better than we have all season, and say we just happen to lose by a couple points, that's a loss and it sucks. But I think it shows that we've grown so much.
You're seeing this more as like a building block game of sorts.
Kind of.
Like this is, you want to just be able to figure it out so that way when we get to conference play,
and
that's
just think, if we
got.
do pull out the win on this game, that's going to look insane for us. Just going, you know, far from home, being able to play a team 9-1 who most people think that we're going to lose.
Yeah.
I think getting that win for them is going to be really great, but if they lose by just a couple points, I think it's a solid loss. If they end up losing by 15, then that's something
gotta go
different.
back to the drawing board, you know?
But I think there's room for error, and I think there's room for improvement with this game. I think this is going to be a good game to learn with because they're going to be kind of a matchup as to like conference games are going to be because, like you said, they're going to be playing teams like Baylor. They're going to be playing teams like Kansas, who both. They're March Madness players. I mean, they are always in
a consistent March Madness.
Yes, they are solid teams. Yeah, the Big 12 is a hard, you know, conference to be in.
Yeah, the Big 12 basketball wise is one of the best conferences.
Yeah, it's a hard conference to be in.
Yeah.
So I think if they can perform with Virginia Tech and keep with them, especially in that first half, and their defense can be killer. Defense is one thing that teams like Baylor feed off of.
Yeah.
So if our defense can perform really high, especially against a team, you know, against Virginia Tech who's offensive based, and we stop them, or they do defensively against a defensive team like Baylor and can match them, I think they're having a solid season. 6-3 is not a record that I like.
Okay.
Obviously, 3 losses isn't very good, especially non-conference play.
Yeah, exactly.
However, they've got to grow. They've lost some players. They've got a lot of new ones. You know, happens every season. Last season not being able to compete in, you know, the tournament, things like that. They're coming off, you know.
I mean, 3 losses already, you know, could be 4. Then you go into conference play. Are you even going to be able to compete in the tournament this year either?
I think that just kind of comes and goes with it. You know, OSU's kind of been having a rough couple seasons in the past.
Yeah.
Performance-wise, if say they get this loss, I say use it as a growing season and keep pushing and improving. Because then if they can keep players, if they can keep Keon Williams and have him grow, kind of like Thunder did with SGA. You take a new guy, you build a team around him, things like that. I think they just kind of...
I think what we're getting at here is we like the foundation. We like what we're seeing. I mean, defensively, and I think it all comes back to the defense is really what it is. OSU, it's a defensive-minded team.
Especially this year,
Is a team, especially this year. It is a team that feeds off of that defense. It's a team that feeds off of players like Musa Cisse getting in there and just blocking the rim. You know? And that's the one thing that scares me in this matchup is because they are so good at blocking the rim and you have such great three-point shooters on that Virginia Tech team.
Everybody else is going to have to perform really well at guarding the outside.
And I think Musa Cisse has set the tone this season defensively.
Yes.
Can the rest of the team,
That might be a thing that gets them in this game. But everybody else is just going to have to step up. I think that's just kind of how it's going to be for the whole season. Because, Musa Cisse is the dominant defensive player. But Avery Anderson's got the steals. Most of the steals he's got outside when they're just lollygagging around with the ball. I think that they can step it up and guard that outside for this game. They're going to be solid. I think that defense is going to really, really help them out in this game.
I agree there. I think really what we're looking at here, this is going to be a close game.
Yeah.
That's how I feel personally.
Sure.
With the defense that we're seeing from OSU versus that kind of offense, with the first half performance with Virginia Tech, the second half without being OSU, I really feel this is going to be a very close game. So I'm curious as to what your score prediction is.
So my score prediction,
You're laughing already. I don't know if I'm inspired here.
I've got it 76-68 Virginia Tech.
Okay.
And the reason I have it like that, I still have it as a close game.
Okay.
8 points. The thing is are we going to be able to keep up with Virginia Tech in the first half? Like we've mentioned several times. Are they going to be able to do that?
Yeah.
So far, they haven't really shown that a lot.
Yeah.
But what you got?
So, me personally, I also have Virginia Tech winning, but I have it a little bit closer. I've got it at 68-63. All right? We've seen, especially in like that UConn game, they came back and they got it close. They got it at 10 points, but they just couldn't seal the deal. And I think we're going to see that in here. And, I got 4 words for you as to why I think it's going to be that way. You ready for this? Sean Padula, Grant Basile.
Yeah.
These guys leading Virginia Tech in points, draining 3 points, and I think once Virginia Tech's able to bring it outside of the arc and outside of the rim, I think that's really what's going to define the game for them, is their ability to shoot from the three and our inability to shoot from the three.
Yes. And it's going to come down to who's going to perform better, our defense or their offense.
Exactly.
And so far it's showing,
I'm thinking their offense.
You got to score points to win games. That's how sports work.
You certainly do.
With them having players, 20-plus point games, I think that's what it's going to come down to.
Either way, we're in for a great matchup. It's going to be on ESPN2. It's at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. But thank you for joining us. That's all we've got here for the O'Callaghan Tipoff Show. I'm Tyler Tripodi. Enjoy
I'm
the
Mia
game.
Ledbetter.
Over the years, we kind of realized that you can get ribs anywhere. You can get a steak anywhere. But you can't always get a Mountain View hot link like ours. So we really decided to focus on that niche and realized we had something really special. So that's when we started focusing more on the hot links, but it's still the same family recipe they were making all those years ago. For us, many of our people that work here have been with us for years and decades. So whereas machines kind of break down over time, the people just get better. And it shows in the products we produce. When you buy a Mountain View product, not only is it going to taste dynamite, but you're also feeding Oklahomans. You're helping employ Oklahomans, and you're helping to fund the state's economy. So what's better than that?
We use the very best of the best ingredients. Demerara sugar is the best there is. Very high quality fruits, berries. The milk we use is the best milk there is. That's why it makes our product stand by itself. I like to make yogurt because I like to eat yogurt. We've been doing this for ourselves for many years because it's a tradition in our family. And we want to have a product which would be very similar to French yogurt, but with our touch of uniqueness, linking our name, our products, with the reputation of the Made in Oklahoma Coalition was probably the best thing we have done as far as promoting our product.